Hey, Tyler, it's Christmas break. So, do you have any plans?
Yeah, I'm so thankful I finally have some time to play some of these video games.
Right, I figured you would. Uh, oh, no.
No, that's not fair. There was time now.
I'm
That's not fair.
so sorry. Isn't that always the way? Hello, and welcome to Twilight Zone Tuesdays. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
So, if you did not catch that, then we were talking about the episode from season one, episode 8, which is Time Enough at Last. And if you have not watched the episode before, then I do encourage you to go and watch it. It's one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes. And there's certainly lots of parodies of this one. And basically, what we're doing with this is a series that we're doing on my channel where we're looking at I've just kind of chosen 13 of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes from the original series, and so we're watching an episode and then having a discussion, and that's basically the project. I'm also doing a booktube companion series with this, with some of the episodes. So this episode in particular, this one has a short story that it was originally based upon. So it's still called Time Enough at Last by Lynn A. Venable, and that was published in 1953. So I've got a separate video for the short story, discussing and analyzing the short story, and then this one's about the TV episode. All right, so we do have a sponsor for today's episode. So
Awesome.
our sponsor for today is Nuclear Bomb-Proof Glasses. Listen, folks, when a nuclear bomb hits, you'll want to see all of the destruction in beautiful, vivid colors and with perfect clarity, which is why you need to talk to the folks over at Nuclear Bomb-Proof Glasses today. Get your pair, because afterwards you want to see all of that death and destruction in perfect clarity. And I suppose you could use them to read as well, but
I guess.
yeah, I don't know. Who would do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoy.
There is a fifth discussion beyond that which is known to man. It is a discussion as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between anger and joy, between silence and outrage, and it lies between the pit of Nathan's fears and the summit of Tyler's knowledge. This is a discussion of intellectual properties. It is a podcast which we call Ignore the Bell.
All right, so we are discussing Time Enough at Last, Season 1, Episode 8 of the original Twilight Zone series. So like I said in the introduction, this is one of the most famous episodes from the original series, and it stars Burgess Meredith, and he does such a great job in this. For anybody who doesn't already know this, if you have seen Rocky, he plays Rocky's coach, Mickey. Come on, Rock! Hit him! Right? That's actually the same actor.
Wow.
It's surprising because he looks so old in the Rocky movies, and he doesn't look that old in this. And there's only a difference of, like, I don't know, I forget how many years, 15 years
Yes.
maybe?
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. There's not that big of a time gap, but he looks like 30 years older in Rocky.
Right.
And he's such a tough guy in Rocky, right? Just this
Yeah.
tough, grizzled guy. And in this, then he just seems like this, weak little ineffectual man who loves to read with his, crazy Coke bottle glasses. And
Yep, absolutely.
so you've seen the episode before, right?
Yes, yeah, I watched it probably like last year
Okay.
for the first time. Yeah, and of course I have seen numerous parodies of it, including Futurama's The Scary Door,
Right.
and also the one on the Drew Carey show.
Mm. Yeah, I'm sure I don't know about the Drew Carey show parody, but I mean, there's been so many, and just little
Yeah.
references, not even like a full thing, just little references to this episode. There's lots and lots. It's a great example of irony, right? And,
Mhm.
and it's a fair twist that you get at the end, because you see throughout the episode, like for instance, when his wife tears up his book of poetry, then you see that he drops to the ground, and this thing that has been destroyed where he can no longer read it because not only has she drawn all over it with, black colored pencils or a marker or something, right? But that's ruined. But then you also see that his glasses fall off of his face. So this is where I'm saying that it's a good, like, it's set up well. It's not just like, oh, all of a sudden his glasses fall off of his face. Like, you do see that they're not quite on there really securely. And so then when it happens at the end, it's this ironic twist, of course. Like, this is one of the best examples of irony within the Twilight Zone because it's such a obvious predicament where he just feels that he has no time to read and he's finally got all the time in the world, and then of course his glasses break. So he thought for a while there that it was going to be this case of he has no reading material in this nuclear wasteland that he's now occupying, and instead it's so much more dark, where it's just such an awful twist where he has all of the material that he could ever hope to read, and he has no way to read it now.
Yep. Yeah. No, absolutely. I do just really quickly want to describe the parody version from Futurama because I think it's hilarious. So it's the last man on Earth. He goes to the library, oh yes, time. There's time now. Time enough at last. And then his glasses fall off, and then he goes, "No, it's not fair. Well, my eyes aren't that bad. I can still read the large print books." And then his eyes fall out, and then he's like, "Oh no! Well, at least I can still read the Braille." And then his hands fall off.
Right.
It's just like, you think, oh, well, maybe this will be okay then. And then just...
Yeah. So that is good. I appreciate that. Now, I do, like I say, I do have a separate booktube video for the short story. Now, and I do really like this episode, but I have to say, after reading the short story, I have so much more appreciation for this episode because I only read the short story yesterday for the first time. A lot of these short stories I had read before, and then I knew that they were based off of Twilight Zone, or Twilight Zone episodes were based off of the short stories. But this one I had not encountered before. And it's doing really interesting stuff that when you read it, the TV episode makes a lot more sense. Or it works on a somewhat deeper level as far as what the writer is trying to achieve thematically, let's say. So I do want to briefly talk about that. But I guess what I want to say before that is what makes this episode, I think, so good is not just this ironic twist that you get at the end, because that is good. I think the most interesting part of the episode is the way his wife treats him and the way she treats literature. I think that's really it, because like you could say, well, his boss at the bank does the same thing, but that's his boss. He's working, right? But then his wife, she's let me use like some good old timey language. She is such a shrew, she's just awful. She's so mean to him. And there's no reason to be mean to him like that, insisting that, they have good conversation, right? And it's like, well, why did she marry this guy if she doesn't like anything about him?
Yeah. No, I was thinking that exact thing while watching the episode, because I'm just like, how? You should have known that this guy was like this when you married him, that he's just always reading. Like, what attracted you to him in the first place, or anything?
Right. And so it's one thing if she has no appreciation for books, but she won't allow him to have an appreciation for any kind of reading, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. She then destroys, and in such a cruel way, she destroys the book of modern poetry that he has hidden under the cushion. And that she's not only scribbled all over it, and then she's so satisfied with herself, but then afterwards, then mocking him for reading it and then tearing it up. So I think that, and especially after reading the short story, then I went, ooh, I really get what you're doing. Because when I first watched the episode, because I've seen this episode quite a few times, then I thought, like, the point of it is really, like, she's kind of like, I don't know, she's a cruel character, but the point of this episode is the ironic twist. But that's not what the short story's really about. So I want to briefly explain this. And like I say, it's going to show up in the BookTube video, but I think it helps with the TV episode. So this short story was published in January of 1953. A book that came out in October of 1953 is Fahrenheit 451.
Oh.
And they're both focusing in on the same theme, which is anti-intellectualism. And what makes this episode so interesting is that based off of the short story, it is a harsh critique of society in the age of early television.
Oh, wow.
And it's a TV episode that's more famous than the short story. That's the irony. How amazing is this irony that comes out of it? That everybody knows the TV episode that's mocking people for watching TV and not reading. And everybody knows the TV version, like myself included. I'm a reader. I have 3 English degrees and I had not read the short story, the TV episode, like 5 times. So it's such a great irony that comes out of this. Like there's in the real world an ironic twist to this.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I know it's
fantastic.
It's so good. That's why I said, like, after I read the short story, I'm like, no, I want to talk about this episode. I definitely want to. Now the short story is quite short. It's only 7 pages, and it's much more absurd. It's an absurdist take on this than the TV episode. The TV episode is very much grounded in reality, as much as can be possible within this kind of scenario, but it is pretty grounded in reality. It accounts for how he survived, the things that he would do naturally afterwards, showing his grief and trauma, establishing that he's found a place like to get food, and that ultimately this leads to the point of despair where he considers taking his own life, because who would possibly want to live in this world, and saying, you know, like, I'll be forgiven, like, surely given the, like, this world, the circumstances. And then he sees the library, and this is all, of course, set up. But in the short story, it's not like this really at all. It's that he doesn't try to find food. He doesn't go home to check on his wife. It's very absurd. And I'll show you like what I mean by this. So the beginning of the short story says, for a long time, Henry Bemis had an ambition to read a book. Not just the title or the preface or a page somewhere in the middle. He wanted to read the whole thing, all the way through from beginning to end. A simple ambition, perhaps, but in the cluttered life of Henry Bemis, an impossibility. And then it says, Henry had no time of his own. There was his wife, Agnes, who owned that part of his life that his employer, Mr. Carsville, did not buy. Henry was allowed enough to get to and from work, that in itself being quite a concession on Agnes's part. And so essentially, and the entire story, like I say, is an absurdist take on this, because it's a social commentary and it's an allegory in which we live in a world in which everybody says I should read more, but there's not enough time. And she's saying there is enough time. You're just not making the right choices. You're choosing to be busy, to occupy your time with other things that you think are more productive, but ultimately they're not. So that's part of the critique, but beyond that, it's this anti-intellectual critique. That she's seeing this trend in society of anti-intellectualism, which really gets emphasized in Fahrenheit 451. Because Fahrenheit 451, it's not so much like people become scared of books. They become scared of literature itself because it makes you feel things. It makes you think things, and thoughts and feelings are frightening because it compels people to do stuff that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And so then what Bradbury is exploring in that is what if you live in a society where people eschew literature and readers and just say that's a bad thing to spend your time on? And she's doing this like 10 months before Bradbury published Fahrenheit 451. And I'm not saying that, like, believe me, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying Bradbury ripped this off from her. I don't think that at all.
Right.
I think that people were concerned in the early 1950s about the effects of television on American culture. And I think that's what this story is about. It's concerned that not only are people going to stop choosing to read books and to read as much as they have in the past, they're going to despise people who do. And they're going to mock people who do and say that's a waste of time. But television somehow is not a waste of time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I do think that part of that is, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so, television is lots of pictures, so it's the equivalent of lots of words. Why would you spend however long reading a story when you can just watch it and be done in 20 minutes compared to something that would take you
yes,
reading.
But at least in the short story, then there's the implication that there is not the same intellectual depth and complexity in television or other activities that you might pursue, like playing cards or whatever else. Nobody even knows that the world is about to end because nobody bothers to read anything. So in the story, this is where I'm saying that it's absurd. It's like he had just started a picture article cheerfully entitled "The New Weapons and What They'll Do to You," and it had come up before. There's another part in the book as well where it talks about like peace talks failing and like they're on the brink of war, but no one reads this stuff. They all just like continue to go about their business as if like nothing's going on, which is very much what Bradbury was doing in Fahrenheit 451, that people don't want to think about things that make them feel bad or are frightening. And television is easy, passive entertainment that will amuse you but require nothing of you. And so it's interesting. And I want to focus on the TV episode, but I'm saying that the TV episode makes more sense to me now that I've read the short story, because I thought it was just supposed to be this ironic take on, like, it could have been anything. It didn't have to be books. It could have been he's got this particular interest in whatever, but then he's unable to do it. Like, he loves running, but then he like breaks his legs. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been anything else. But after reading the short story, then I've realized, oh no, this isn't a device to get us to an ironic twist of he finally has time to pursue his hobby, but now he can't pursue it. It's that the world itself collapses because people are not paying attention to important things. They're too busy amusing themselves to death, which is a Neil Postman book, the title, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is specifically about that.
Interesting.
And the fact that the TV episode doesn't really make that commentary. I'm saying you can watch the episode and not realize what the story's about, what the social critique really is, which is television is rotting your brain, more or less. That I'm going, oh my goodness, I think it's true. Because I never caught the social critique until I read the short story. Then I went, yikes, this is a short story that's focused on the same theme as Fahrenheit 451. Like, or Orwell, like 1984, like it's like very much like, oh, we can't, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want people to be intelligent and to explore these questions. Just amuse yourself, whether it's television or whether it's card games or whatever other suburban activities you can pursue.
Yeah. Visiting the neighbors in order to have a dinner party. That's
precise.
Yeah. Wow. That's really, really brilliant.
Yeah. It is like the short story is, and then I'm going, and it's so ironic that then gets turned into a TV episode where that gets lost in the
Right.
episode itself. The episode itself is far more grounded in reality because that's what, and it is interesting because I've been going through this, and some of the short stories were adapted by the original writer into a teleplay. This one, the teleplay is by Rod Serling. And like you can imagine, like what Rod Serling is even thinking with the original short story. He's going, well, I love the concept of this guy who loves to read but has no time to do it. So then he's in the vault at the bank, and then we're going to have this great ironic twist at the end, which she does have in the short story. But he's going, but all that like social critique about, you know, amusing ourselves to death and like the influence of television, he just removed that because it's in the short story, but it's not in the TV episode. It's not. Yeah. We need to watch TV together. But in the short story, it's you can't read. We need to watch TV. And he's like, well, like, why can't you watch TV on your own? And like, she won't. She needs him to be there when she's watching television.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. And that's just removed from the TV episode, that critique of television itself. Like, I want to know what Marilyn Venable, the writer of the short story, what did she think of this? Like, you know? When it's like, she's like, okay, that's like, I'm sure like if she's anything like most writers, she's like, I'll take the check, you know, right. I'm not really happy about the direction you're necessarily going to take this in, or maybe after the fact, because she probably didn't have much say over what he would do. He just purchased the television rights to it. But it's interesting. I mean, aside from that, it's still a good episode of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's it's really interesting to see how obsessed the main character is with reading. That he's reading on the job, you know, like literally while counting out dollars, and then he takes a break to turn the page. Like it sets that up so well. And then you get that moment when he's coming out of the vault where his glasses are askew, and says, you know, you get this blurry image, and clearly he can not see a thing without his glasses. So it sets that up. And then I like that because it is so interesting, because everybody talks about or references that very last moment. Yes. But like this episode is 25 minutes long, and people only talk about 2 minutes of it, maybe.
Yeah. I know. I know, and that's the thing where I'm looking at this and realizing that the episode itself is interested in other questions besides the ironic twist, but we only think about the ironic twist because. And this is
mentions loneliness, and that's such a good moment to include. He's not thinking about books at that point. He does genuinely have more interests than just reading. It's, you know, I'm just going to be alone, and this is and I mean, of course, books can keep him company, but yeah, just it's fascinating.
It is, and I don't know how well, because like you get that combination of themes, because that theme is absent from the short story. This idea of the despair, the loneliness, how can I live in a world with no one else? It's just completely absurd. It's just like, oh, great, but the library is still here, so I finally get to read, and it's short. So it is not exploring this theme of how do you live in a world where everyone else is gone, and then it's like, oh, but I have books, so this is going to be okay in some way. And so on the one hand, I'm like, you're combining that theme, but there's also to some degree the criticism of the world where they won't allow you to read. So there is a little bit of anti-intellectualism within the actual episode. But in the short story, like I say, it's such a silly thing because he's living in a world in which he's never read a book. Right? For a long time, Henry Bemis had an ambition to read a book, not just the title or the preface or a page somewhere in the middle. He wanted to read the whole thing all the way through from beginning to end. But it says that it's an impossibility for him to do this. So it's interesting to me that, because the short story, like I say, is so absurd. That's clearly not our world. So then when he's in this scenario where everything has been destroyed, then he's able to achieve that ambition. So then I go, so it actually ends up being allegorical. We're not supposed to take the short story literally. We're supposed to say, do I have the type of life where I think that reading a book is an impossibility, but it's ultimately, I've tricked myself into believing that that's the world I live in, but it's really because of choices and because of peer pressure and whatever else. But the TV episode isn't doing that at all. Instead, it's saying that it's everyone else who is preventing him, but he continues to read where he can. It's so much more grounded in reality. So you end up resenting everyone else a lot more in the TV episode than I think you do in the short story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why that moment of him commenting about loneliness really hits home, because like he, despite everybody, getting in the way of him reading, then at that moment he's so desperate for anything to do that he wants those people back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that whole grief and loneliness, that despair, that's a theme that is present in the TV episode, and it works. Yeah. It's not even there because the TV episode is doing something different than the short story. And it shows even these people, like basically the human need for companionship. Yeah. And that even if these people are not particularly kind to him, he still yearns for that connection with other human beings. And then I think it gets a little muddled, because then he's saying that he's got the connection though through literature, through these characters, that can substitute for real human contact. That it's almost like through the destruction of the city, at the very least, he realizes that what he was missing was people, that he spent all of his time in books and didn't value human relationships. And now once everyone's gone, then it's like, oh, I guess I should have valued human relationships, and I do want to spend time with people. But then it moves into, oh, but I do have books. I just feel like the TV episode, I haven't fully thought through it, but I feel like thematically it's more muddled than the short story.
Yeah, no, I do think that's fair. So I noticed that there are 3 moments in the episode where there are shattered glass, and I think that it is relevant and meaningful, but I haven't thought through it completely. But like the first moment is when he is in the vault and the bomb hits, and then his pocket watch, when the glass on it shatters, freezing time, essentially. The second time that there's shattered glass is, or that we hear shattered glass, is when he knocks over the bookcase, or not the bookcase, the case that holds the pistol. So the moment of desperation there, of yes, I'm going to use this to take my own life, and then essentially like putting a stop to his life. The time of his life. And then the third time is when his glasses shatter, marking the end of another moment that he had, another time that he had.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I haven't thought through that, but you're right that there is significance to each one of those instances with glass breaking, because that is the ironic twist at the end of it. But as we've been talking about, that's the thing that people remember, but that's like a tiny part of a 25-minute episode. It's like a few seconds of it. And because we do have that symbol the imagery on screen of his pocket watch, the glass on it breaking. And it's that he has been imprisoned by this human construct, this artificial construct of time, right?
Yeah.
That there's not enough time. And, his boss is measuring his time. You start at this time. And like when you're on my time, you know what I mean?
Right.
At the workplace,
Yeah.
it's like, it's my time right now. So you need to do what I want you to do. And then when he's home, he's on his wife's schedule. She's in charge of his time. But ultimately, with the bomb, it ends up meaning he's freed, right? That artificial human construct is just broken. That it's like he's now released from time, the imprisonment of time. But then, if there's no books and if there's no people, then that endlessness of time, the infinite amount of time passing, where like basically time doesn't exist, and that sense of eternity, but nothing to do in eternity, that he can't take that. So then he breaks the glass to try to end that, to basically end this endless period of time.
Yeah.
And then, yes, and then I'm thinking about how it then fits in with his glasses breaking.
I mean, yeah, because he says there's time enough at last.
Yes.
And then there was time now. And so it's like all that time is meaningless at that point.
It becomes meaningless again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know I would need to think through it more in order to
Me too.
really explore that. But I do think that there's definitely something there, and I think that's really fascinating.
Absolutely, there really is something there, because that is a curious moment. It starts with the pocket watch that you see glass breaking there, glass breaking when he gets the pistol, and then of course what we all think of with the episode, which is his glasses breaking.
Yeah.
And they all have to do with time, and it being called Time Enough at Last. I'm sure that, like if you think it through carefully enough, like you could really make a good reading of that. It's really interesting. But yeah, so I mean, I continue to really like this episode, and it is well done. Like,
yeah.
For something, because to me it seems so silly every time I think about it, that I'm like, it's such a silly concept of, he survives in the bank vault, everything is destroyed, because like because this episode is grounded in reality. It's trying to show how he will be okay, and I'm like, he's just gonna get radiation sickness within like a few days. He's gonna be dead. But
well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how hydrogen bombs work compared to atom bombs.
They release even more radiation.
Oh, okay.
So the dude would be a goner, like immediately. Like even if you survive the initial
back
blast.
To the Futurama episode, his eyes fall out, his hands fall off.
Right. That's essentially it. So that's why I like the short story where it's absurdist. It's supposed to be allegorical. It's not, and it's a social commentary. It's not really about the plot. But this episode is very much like, no, he could survive. Kind of like in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, of like, no, a lead-lined refrigerator would work. It's that like, well, okay, I guess a bank vault would work, and then I guess the books would be okay, but they'd all be irradiated. So you're reading them and you're just like picking up radiation on the couch cushion. He's like knocking and it's just like, what are you doing? You're a goner.
Yeah.
But if you look at it and you say that it's not really about this, realistic scenario, because of course it's not, because of course it's so absurd that, he would be content because he's found the public library. That's why I like it more acting as a social commentary, and I do kind of wish that the TV episode, well, I mean, maybe not, I like it as it is. I'm just curious what would happen if Rod Serling tried to make it a little bit more allegorical and kept a bit more of that criticism. I think it'd be a more interesting episode, because like I say, he just omits the critique of television and its influence on culture and the dumbing down of culture and what it's done to readers and literature. He's just like, no, I'm not going to make TV the bad guy here. Like, I'm a TV writer, because he is. And it's an interesting thing, because he has written such great stuff for television. So then to say that like television doesn't have good content is not a fair criticism. But then again, 1953 to 1959, like, television came a long way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That, like, when Lynn Venable wrote this in January of 1953, and then it's like, now we're looking at a Twilight Zone episode in 1959. It's like, but the Twilight Zone has got great instances of writing, including adaptations of really good short stories, making people aware of them to then go and pursue that. It's not that it's denying reading. It's in fact telling people, like, advertising for it in a way, saying, because it does have it in the title, like in the credits, then it says based upon the short story by.
Yeah.
When it's based off of these things, and at least for somebody like me, it encourages me to go and read it. It doesn't discourage me. It's not like I've seen the TV version, so I don't need to read the short story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's mostly what I had to say about this one.
Yeah. I just with this viewing, I really picked up on those 3 moments of glass breaking, and that was my main takeaway, I guess.
No, and I think it's a really, really good observation. It really is. This is where I'm saying the Twilight Zone is so well done that that critique of television, I don't know, is fair in this show, because there's gotta be intention behind that. Like, you can't convince me otherwise. Like, because it focuses in on the watch, and then of course the ending with his glasses breaking. That it's that, you know, imagery of glass breaking, and they're all significant moments in this. So I don't see how you can not catch that this is trying to do something with it. And I love the fact that you bring that up, because it does work really well.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's about all that I had for this episode.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, so we'll move on to the next one. All right, folks, feel free to comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Imagine, if you will, subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Leave your comments below, and maybe, just maybe, you'll receive a response. All for a channel referred to by many as Ignore the Bell.